Hi, and welcome to Web3 Unfiltered, where we dissect the systems shaping decentralized infrastructure, not the hype, not the headlines, but the mechanics behind the movement. I am your host, Collins Odabi. Today's guest is Jordan Miller, founder of Satori Network, a decentralized AI protocol building what he calls a future oracle. Jordan's background spans philosophy, information systems, business intelligence, and distributed consensus technologies. From leading development at Moontree to building a brain-inspired predictive network at Satori, his work sits at the intersection of AI modeling, blockchain architecture, and collective forecasting. In Web3, prediction markets, decentralized data networks, and oracle systems are foundational. But Satori pushes further, attempting to decentralize not just financial coordination, but predictive intelligence itself. Today, we'll explore whether an open, distributed forecasting network can meaningfully improve markets, reduce informational asymmetry, and shift how societies coordinate decisions. Welcome to the show, Jordan. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right, Jordan. Before we begin, I like to ask my guests to talk about themselves. So I would like to know how your story began and how you got to where you are today. How did all of this start?
Sure. I got interested in blockchain back in 2013 or so. And I saw that there was Bitcoin and there was all these competitors popping up. And I noticed that, the algorithm that's used, proof of work, it's, heavy and it's a lot of computation. And that's by design. And it doesn't really give us any value other than securing the Bitcoin network or, whatever systems are using the proof of work algorithm. And that's when I started this kind of journey, because I wanted to build a proof of prediction algorithm at first. The goal was to build a proof of prediction algorithm that could manifest a prediction network that could, essentially secure the blockchain through proof of prediction, and at scale too, predicting anything that people wanted predicted. And that attempt was not quite the right way to build this system, to build a system where you can predict anything and produce value by doing so. It wasn't really the right way to go about it. So it was a good learning experience for me. And I eventually came back to the idea and built Satori in a more efficient and more effective way. That's kind of my story in a nutshell.
Amazing. Jordan, your work at Satori raises a structural question for Web3. Decentralization, has rebuilt money, governance, and ownership. But can it also decentralize forecasts or foresight? If prediction networks or if prediction intelligence becomes open, because I understand Satori is open, if prediction intelligence becomes open, incentive aligned, and blockchain verified, it could fundamentally alter how markets price risk, how organizations allocate capital, or even how communities coordinate action. Or it could also introduce new systemic vulnerabilities. So on this episode of Web3 Unfiltered, I'd like us to examine whether Satori's decentralized AI oracle is infrastructure for the next phase of digital coordination, or maybe an ambitious experiment at the frontier of crypto and machine intelligence. I understand you have a background in philosophy and information systems. So I would ask, how did those disciplines shape your understanding of intelligence?
Intelligence is, they haven't really known how to define it for a long time. Back the researchers used to say, well, we'll know it when we see it, or intelligence is whatever produces intelligent behavior. It's just a tautology. And I don't really like those kind of cop-outs. So I really was interested in how the brain actually produces intelligence and what it is. I was fascinated by that. So I studied the brain a lot, as in I studied those that were studying the brain. There's groups like, my favorite was Numenta. Numenta is an organization that researches the research, because there's a whole bunch of experiments that are done, but there's not a lot of understanding behind those experiments. So Numenta was an organization that kind of puts it all together. They identified several key characteristics, or maybe we could call them principles of organization that the brain uses in order to produce intelligence. And one of them is hierarchy. Another one is pattern recognition in hierarchy. We could also talk about, the brain is highly redundant, and its redundancy, everything that it does in redundancy is also unique. It never does the exact same thing twice, but it does do very, very similar things all the time. And so it's got a lot of unique redundancy. And those are the kind of operating principles that I tried to push into Satori, to make it work as closely as I could to the major principles on why the brain is intelligent. And I would say the main focus of that, the brain is incredibly efficient. And, it was a mystery for a long time as to how the brain could be so efficient. But the main answer to that question is that its ultimate goal at all times is building a future, a prediction of the future. It's always trying to predict the future, trying to make a global model of what the future is going to be. And then it shares that model with all the other parts of the brain. That's what all the parts are doing. And because they have kind of a global coordination, a global model of what the organism is going to see and do in the near future, they can coordinate all their efforts and be extremely efficient. So I would say that's kind of the very main realization, is that we could do that on a computer, with computer hardware on a global network. We don't have to just confine that ability to brains. We could make a global brain that produces a picture of the future, which would make us all highly more efficient, because we could coordinate through that image. Anyway, that's kind of it's kind of the rundown of where my study of the brain led me.
Amazing. So, in a nutshell, you just described how the brain inspires the architecture of Satori. That is amazing. I understand that Satori is a interconnection of Satori nodes, as you call them. And I would like to know, what role does blockchain consensus play in validating or aggregating predictions?
We don't put all of the predictions on the blockchain. So sometimes a naive view might say, oh, you're putting all that information there so we can all look it up. Blockchains are very slow and expensive, and they're just not a good fit for transferring information. So instead, we use the blockchain as a backbone, and then we all that gives us like identity, like who are you on the chain, and so now you know who to trust. But we don't use it for transferring the actual predictions. To do that, we transfer it peer-to-peer. It's actually using a relay system, but it's over an open network that anybody can transfer data through those relays. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but it's used mainly for identity. We can use it for reputation, recording how well somebody's predictions are over time. We actually have a lot of doors open to us in how we use it going forward. But so far, it's been mainly to understand who are appropriate members of the network, who's actually doing valuable work.
Amazing. That does answer my question. Thank you so much. Jordan, I would like to know, or we would like to know, how Satori generates prediction and also what data flows through the network. You described Satori as the future oracle. So what exactly is a future oracle in operational terms?
I would say, back to this brain discussion, the brain realizes, or evolution really realizes that there's really nothing it can use to make the brain intelligent except the assumption that there's going to be a next moment in time. And so everything is hung off time. And so the underlying assumption behind Satori, and you asked about the data streams, is basically the same. We like to think of data in most domains, including business intelligence and stuff like that, as static data, like a data set. But I think that's fundamentally the wrong way to view data. I think the right way to view it as a series of data streams, or we could think of it as a data set that's growing. It's always growing because there's more data to add to it. And that's a data stream. So anything that changes throughout time and can be measured, and then tomorrow you can measure it again and it's different, that's a data stream. Things that don't change, like 1 + 1 = 2, that's just static data. But there's a lot we usually interact with and use and care about data streams more than we care about axioms or assumptions. So I think the fundamental realization is that the whole world is made up of data streams. And so Satori, or a node in Satori, a neuron, will watch a data stream or several. It will watch the data streams, and then it will start to make predictions about them because it's making an internal model. It's trying to understand how these data streams change. If it's watching the price of gold or the price of Bitcoin or the weather in Mumbai or whatever it is, it's a data stream. And so it starts to predict it into the future. And then when it does that, it has instantly created a brand new data stream, which is the prediction of that thing into the future. And so whenever it gets new information about, say, the price of gold, it then runs that through its model and produces a new prediction about what the price of gold will be next. And so that's basically how it works, which allows the other nodes, the other neurons, to kind of leverage the work that it's doing because it's building these models, it's listening to a whole bunch of data streams. And if somebody else is predicting something that's similar to the price of gold, like the price of silver or something, then it can that neuron can leverage all the work that the gold predictor is doing by listening not to everything that the gold predictor listens to, but just by listening to the predictions of gold. So that's kind of how it leverages and one of the ways in which it finds an efficiency. But anyway, yeah, data streams and predictions are just a series of data streams too. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it does. Thank you so much. Satori, you described it as a decentralized oracle. So could a decentralized oracle meaningfully reduce information asymmetry in financial markets?
Yes, it can, because, and people might scoff at that. I don't know, but the world is very complex, and we evolved these brains to handle the complexity of the world, and we do pretty well. And so we're able to manage a lot of chaos just from just from one little brain that we have inside our heads. And so, and we do that. The brain does that by associating various data streams together. It's getting data streams from the eyes and the ears and the hands. We're feeling things. We have all this sensory information flowing into the brain at all times, and it associates those with motor output. And it's able to make sense of the world very well. So I think a decentralized oracle can help with the information asymmetry in markets. But markets are by their very nature chaotic. So when I first started Satori, I actually kind of didn't want to sick it on markets right away, because I was like, well, that's the highest entropy stuff. Why don't we start with easier to predict things and work our way up to markets? So it is kind of a long-term prediction that it'll help or be able to help with market prediction. But we've already seen in certain cases that it does pretty well. So yeah, I do think so in the long run.
All right. Thank you so much for the inputs. One more thing I would like to know. If predictive intelligence becomes widely accessible, what new risk could emerge? And also, what happens when collective forecasts influence behavior and in the end become self-fulfilling?
Predictions on an oracle like this, a future oracle, do have the possibility of becoming self-fulfilling prophecies. But everything does. Literal prophecies that were uttered by people thousands of years ago have the chance to become self-fulfilling, even though there may not be anything to them whatsoever. So that's always the case. And what it comes down to is who is heeding the predictions, who pays attention to them, and why, So it has the potential. And that's why it has to be kind of open and decentralized. If you had kind of an entity that was in complete control of this, kind of like how OpenAI is in complete control of ChatGPT, they have competitors, which is good. That's a decentralizing force. But they're a big, major player, and they're huge, and they've got ultimate control over that product, and everybody talks to it. It's a big thing. So they have the ability already to sway mass public opinion just by saying, the AI is now going to have this opinion, and if they do it on the margin, nobody will notice, or not enough people will notice. And they have the ability to define narrative now. And so it's a big power. And I think something like the future, which, like you said, with self-fulfilling prophecies, implies that power directly. I kind of think that should be open and decentralized as much as possible, so that it's hard for one entity to gain control. That's the real danger I see, is that it could be centralized, right? Because then that entity has a lot of power that they shouldn't have. So that's why I started this as a blockchain project, open and decentralized. Anybody can run a node, anybody can make predictions, anybody can broadcast. They don't even have to make predictions using the node. It's an open protocol. So anyway, that's kind of the fear that I have, is too much centralization in this domain too quickly.
Amazing. You have dissected the reason why it has to be decentralized. And it's very, very important, because if it's not decentralized, it could open room for manipulations and, well, influence of certain entities. So, Jordan, do you have any final notes for our listeners?
I'm happy you had me on, and I appreciate that. I always like talking about Satori. I think we're doing good things, and yeah, I appreciate it.
All right, then. Thank you so much. So, I guess we'll be rounding up now. That wraps up today's episode of Web3 Unfiltered. A big thank you to Jordan Miller for sharing how Satori blends AI, blockchain, and predictive intelligence to create a decentralized future oracle, and what that means also for finance, market, and collective decision making. If you found this episode valuable, don't forget to share it with your network and subscribe to Web3 Unfiltered so you never miss an insight. Until next time, stay sharp, stay curious, and keep building.